Say that again. Wait, I'll tell you.
Wait, I don't remember it. Wait.
The
indigenous multi-tribal factionalism breeds the conflict musically that becomes the inverted rumba. It can't even be played without at least 3 drummers playing different things simultaneously.
Polyrhythm. Polyrhythm, says Norm. Nice to meet you, Norm.
Elizabeth.
Yes, I'll be back tomorrow at 9 to get the full story
See you
on
tomorrow.
other things. Yeah.
So just a quick piece of
Way down yonder.
Yes.
In New Orleans.
Quick piece of history.
Hey, bro. My name is Norman Joseph Nail, like a hammer.
And so yesterday you were telling me how you got here to New Orleans and your parents. So can you back up on that a little bit?
My parents?
Mm-hmm.
Well, my dad is, his family was from Abilene, and they were deaf-mute people that had shoe stores, shoe repair businesses, and they went bust during the Depression. And they went to Dallas, pregnant with him with 4 kids in the back of the Rambler convertible, parked the car in an alley, and when he was born at the hospital, it was nabbed for them they were living in an alley. And he grew up, helped with social services. They moved to Biloxi. He eventually joined the Navy, and on the GI program went to college in Hattiesburg, and he rode his bicycle from Pascagoula to Hattiesburg and slept on the bench Mondays through Thursdays and rode home on Friday. So he was a really serious guy that grew up to save the world.
Wow.
As a social worker. He was a progressive 19 Kennedy style social worker with a pocket protector, dippity-doo, and horn-rimmed glasses. And my mom's a farm girl from the Hattiesburg, Collins, Mississippi area. And they had the same amount of money before, during, and after the Depression. The only thing they bought with money was sugar, coffee, and bullets. They grew all their food, raised animals. So my parents met in college, and they were what I would like to call Kennedy liberals. They had friends that marched with Martin Luther King, but they paid their own tuition, so they did not protest and go on strike. They went to school. She was a nurse, he was a social worker, and when the Medgar Evers riots happened in the Mississippi area, they decided to either move to Memphis or New Orleans. And my mom went to a fortune teller who always would ask her for exactly and only the amount of money that she had secretly hidden to pay her. And that lady said the northern option was bad and the southern option was good, and we moved to New Orleans.
That was in Biloxi, that the fortune teller was?
In Hattiesburg.
In Hattiesburg, okay.
And we moved to New Orleans in the summer of '68.
Okay.
And it was amazing.
How old were you?
I was 3 years old, sitting on my mom's pregnant lap in a '65 Mustang. And I remember going down Decatur Street. The interstate was bleach white. And I remember seeing that there was an open keg available at the Jack's Brewery, bring your own cup, and people were sleeping in Jackson Square overnight. And I saw a girl squatting and poo-pooing behind a bush. I was 3 years old. And when she turned her head, she had a beard. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not in Mississippi anymore. This is not Highway 49. And we had an enchanted beginning in New Orleans. I lived on Elysian Fields next door to a bass player that was in the symphony, and I could hear him through the wall. And I grew up to be a bass player. And my dad was partially Choctaw, and he ended up as the social worker for the Choctaw community on the West Bank, the Houma Indians.
So you were talking yesterday about how Choctaw really means a merge, right? Or is
Choctaw is a term like American. You can be an American and be from Puerto Rico, from an Eskimo from Alaska, from Maine, or from California. There's 60 different things that you could be and be an American. And in that same sense, there's 60 different micro tribes that you could be and be called Choctaw by the federal government, including the local ones were the Biloxi, the Pascagoula, the Colapisa, on the north shore of the Alabama. The Colapisa, by the way, that's the Jazz Fest area Indians that Bienville and Iberville met And the first day that they came to New Orleans, they noted that the calendar said it was Mardi Gras Day of 1699 at Bayou St. John. Right where the former Beauregard statue would be the appropriate place for that marker to be. And there were 4 different Indian tribes, territories that converged at that area. But the main one that lived right there was called Colapisa. And that means the people that listen and therefore understand.
Sounds like the opposite of Pensacola. Colapisa, I don't know.
Yeah,
That
Cola word is a native word in the larger Choctaw community.
So is Cola the listening part or the people part?
Good question.
Yeah.
We've got to get a linguist on
Yeah,
that.
okay, yeah.
But I know that the word TCH, as in Chafuncta and Chapatulas, that's one of the local tribes' names for a river. Chapatulas means people by the river. Those were the Indians that lived in Natchez. And the Sun King of France didn't like the idea that there was a Sun King of the Natchez. I was born in Natchez. And the Sun King of Natchez, the entire Natchez tribe was wiped out by the Choctaw. It was a mercenary conscript. The Choctaw were paid to kill the Natchez. But the Natchez had some survivors that came downriver, and they settled at what we would call the Colonial Club Country Club golf course in Harahan.
Okay.
And the runaway slaves that were English speaking, probably from the Ivory Coast and broken in Jamaica, those people were uptown servants and they ran away and bred with these people by the river, the Natchez, formerly Natchez, and that became what was called the Chapatulas. And the Chapatulas and the upriver people have a rhythm that we call the shuffle, the Chuck Berry Maybelline song, boom, 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 boom. And that's their beat. Whereas the local Indians, such as the Colapisa and the Homa, they had what would be a 2/4, like a reggae beat. You've heard both these beats before in the movies. When you put the two together, you get a polyrhythm. And if you mute a few of those beats, you get the inverted rumba, which is the New Orleans groove. Bump, bump, bum, 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 bum.
Awesome.
And that's kind of how we got here musicologically. The African community was eager to adopt people that were in hardship, and runaway American Indian men ended up breeding into the African American community. They specialized in talking to God and music and being trackers and trappers. So you can see, that old legend of Trapper Joe and the reverend that looks up at the sky and begs God, and the music of that community is very much coming out of the male Native American contribution versus the Daniel Boone, Davy Crockett type of wives were Indian women who had, and I have those ancestors on my mama's side, and they had the savvy to be great lovers, great cooks, great housekeepers. They could catch a catfish in a hole with their hand, and they did a lot of sewing and preserving of food. And the redneck women throughout the South have these customs that came from their matrilineal root.
Wow.
And so the Indian women went with the white community. And the redneck South is a lot of its mores, such as quilting, catching that catfish with your hand. That all comes out of the southern community, the 5 civilized tribes, the Creek, the Seminole, the Cherokee. Almost all of the Cherokee bred. The joke in the American Indian community is when a white person says they're Indian, you're like, Cherokee, right? And the Choctaw and the Chickasaw. The Chickasaw controlled the river, the Ohio and the Mississippi. Memphis is built on what was called Chickasaw Ridge. These people were interesting because the Choctaw and the Chickasaw, we have a common brotherhood. We're cousins. And our legend comes out, our common folklore is that we came out of that hole in the ground from the other side. There's a hole in the ground in a central Mississippi cave. And our legend is that we came out of that from the other side. And every night the two brothers would leave their walking sticks stuck in the ground, and in the morning, whichever direction they had fallen and were pointing in, they would migrate that direction. And one day the Choctaw stick was still standing and the Chickasaw was pointing in a direction. That's when they split. The Chickasaw ended up becoming owners of guns. And when they went to the Trail of Tears, they brought 400 black slaves with them that they owned. And these people were denied U.S. citizenship for being Indians, but they were denied Chickasaw tribal membership for being black. And that group of people I believe, have something to do with that massacre that occurred of the black community that occurred in Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. That's who was being killed, these undesirable people. But the Chickasaw took wagons on the Trail of Tears after selling their land for cash and had 400 slaves they brought with them. And the first thing they did with their money when they got to Oklahoma was to buy half of the Choctaw land. Mm-hmm. And now the casino sits on what coulda, shoulda, woulda been Choctaw property.
Wow. So is Chickasaw, when you say Choctaw, and we know that it's a merge of a bunch of different...
Chickasaw is one tribe,
okay,
and Choctaw is
Choctaw's
another tribe,
okay.
And we have a common heritage as cousins.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And the Chickasaw always pushed the Choctaw around until Andrew Jackson. When Andrew Jackson came to New Orleans, he had the Caddo Indians guarding one flank of his army, with all kinds of other army in between. Kentucky, Mississippi, the Creole Regiment from New Orleans, the American Regiment. There were a dozen different armies there. And the Choctaw were on the other flank. And Jackson knew that he was vulnerable about being assassinated while he was sleeping. So he slept in the Indian ranks. And he ended up preferring the Choctaw ranks. These are Choctaw that came out of Philadelphia, Mississippi. And he preferred them highly, and they guarded him. And it's interesting that the Philadelphia people were never forced by him to go on the Trail of Tears. And the Choctaw that guarded him had a uniform. They would carry a list of weapons. They would ride horseback proficiently and have a long spear or a long rifle with a bayonet on the end. And 2 pistols and a gun and a knife in each boot and a sword. And they were proficient with all of them. They wore different hats to signify within their own knowings of who had what specialty and rank. But they generally had the tall knee-high black boots, mm-hmm. and some kind of hat and a black blazer. And they ended up becoming what we now know as the Secret Service. They stayed with Jackson the rest of his life. They went back to the Hermitage, and they went down into Florida.
Do you know what year we're talking about? I'm not good with...
Well, I know that in 1834, the Creek Indians were forced onto boats and sent to Jackson Barracks in New Orleans, and the Seminole Indians were brought out of Tampa and sent to Jackson Barracks on boats. And so 2 of the 5 tribes from the Trail of Tears came through New Orleans and were later shipped up the Mississippi River and joined the Trail of Tears in Arkansas. And so what do we have here? Jackson was in New Orleans in 1814 in January. He had a conference with Jean Lafitte where he smoked cannabis, drank absinthe and alcohol, and he was convinced by Lafitte that the British would not land where they thought they were going to land. If they crossed the river from the West Bank, they would end up way downriver, and they were waiting there for them. Mm-hmm. And the Choctaw were sitting there, and the Caddo Indians from the Shreveport area They were on the other flank, and that was 1814. We know Jackson started the Trail of Tears in the 1830s. I believe 1828 is when he was elected.
Okay.
So we're basically talking about 1810 through 1860. And when the Civil War happened, Jackson Barracks closed as far as keeping Indians captive. But for decades, there were hundreds of Indians living in the 9th Ward under guard, and the high-ranking ones were brought into the city with guard, went to the French Market and to the Opera House. And the Creole community favored the Indians because movies and plays and the Buffalo Bill Wild West show all showed that Indians were fighting successfully. They were able to fight against white men with guns. So the black community loved that. And the Mardi Gras Indians adopted that concept. And since there were people of color uptown that had different Indian blood in them than the Esplanade area, than the Jazz Fest area, also came from different parts of Africa and spoke different languages and were broken in, the French-speaking slaves were broken in Haiti, whereas the English-speaking slaves were broken in Jamaica. Different colonies, different languages. So the two different black communities were very different, and they liked the Indians. So the feudalism became the Mardi Gras Indian tradition of dueling. And for a long time, people were shooting each other. And it eventually became a fashion and music contest, but the rhythms are different. Originally they were. They've all blended now.
So what's going to happen today? So we're on Mardi Gras, and Zulu's got a lot going on.
James Andrews is the man. James Andrews is known as 12th. A lot of children in his family. George Foreman style. Holler a number at him. James Andrews is a prolific musician. Once upon a time, he had a little brother named Troy. And he brought Troy to a gig where we were playing. In the Revealers, we were playing at a block party in the French Quarter. And Troy was told, you're gonna play. And he did everything right, and he grew up to become Trombone Shorty. James Andrews is the big brother, and really, realistically, the tutorial source, musical professor, sponsor, and guardian, and creator of the tremendous phenomenon we know as Trombone Shorty.
Wow.
And James Andrews is playing at the Zulu Festival
Today.
at Mardi Gras.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And it's going to be an important day because there's rain forecast tomorrow. So today is the day to have fun without worrying about the weather.
Right. And are you playing today?
No, not today.
Yeah. Tomorrow? Or last
Tomorrow,
night?
probably.
Did you play last night? Yeah.
I played last night. I tend to play in the French Quarter with a bass amp powered by a battery and a wagon. And I play with all the different brass musicians that don't need amplifiers. And I play in a rhythm and blues band, sweet soul music. And I play in a blues rock band, the Lafitte Street Rollers. And I play with several different Mardi Gras Indian groups, including Jeannie Smith and the Comanche Hunters.
So I noticed that you use the word Indian instead of Native American, and I've spoken to a few Indians in the Pensacola area. They use that word too.
Yep.
Any reason on that, or just?
Well, you know, there was a man in the Three Stooges named Curly. He wasn't named Curly, but if you call me Curly long enough and start paying me money, I guess my name's Curly. You think that other guy's name was really Shimp?
I know.
You think that his name was really Groucho Marx?
Yeah.
It's a stage name that ended up going viral.
And we understand it. Here we do anyway, and we know we're not
You think
talking
that
about.
little kid was named Spanky?
I know.
That kid in the Little Rascals is really named Spanky.
Yeah. Yeah. And Pluto's still a planet too, so anyway.
Pardon?
Pluto is still a planet in my book too, so.
Well, you know the thing with Pluto is that the reason it was disqualified as a planet, do you know that story?
I should. I taught science forever, but
Pluto
revolves
has a moon
yeah.
that's over 51% of its
Okay.
size. So instead of Pluto sitting here and its moon orbiting, Pluto and its moon mutually orbit like two marbles or a pair of clackers from the 70s.
Oh, I love the clackers.
So Pluto and its moon look like a pair of clackers. Its moon is almost the same size of it. So Pluto, the definition of a planet is that its orbit is determined primarily by its gravitational field. And Pluto's gravitational field is not primarily determined by it. It's determined mutually by it and its moon of almost the same size.
So even if they call it a subplanet, it's still a planet. Planet is a subplanet. Cell phone is a phone. Anyway.
Well, you know about the Pluto all the phenomenons with Pluto has just moved into the zodiac sign of Aquarius.
No, I didn't know that.
And it stays in a zodiac sign for over a decade. It's a slow-moving planet. So
You know a lot about a lot. You do. Are you interested into astrology as well?
I got nicknamed Knowledge by a band leader of mine back in the days. Mm-hmm. But I do have a BA in BS, a Bachelor of Philosophy,
Yeah.
which taught me how to think. And it's great to think and learn. We just want to learn.
You're a great speaker too. Like, do you do tours around here?
No, I'm not a tour guide.
Like my cousin does that.
I'm a historian.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm a historian of the healing arts and of anthropology and people and geography. I love geography.
So what is your take on Ayurvedic medicine?
Well, I like the idea that there's three doshas, three types, and that I think that I summarize them as that Vata is like a sparrow, very agile and sensitive, and that Kapha is like a elephant, slow to get started but very powerful, but doesn't like a locomotive, doesn't stop easily, and that Pitta is like a dog, very loyal and barking and wants to eat promptly. And I think of them as everybody sort of has that sparrow, elephant, and dog inside of them. If somebody's being mean to the kids, when you're on the ladder at the parade route, the barking dog comes out. If you've got to go 3 miles to get to the dang parade route, the elephant comes. You don't want the sparrow trying to pull the ladder. So the food that enhances your Vata power is the wrong dang stuff to be having. You don't need chamomile tea when you got to move this ladder all the way to Jefferson Avenue. You got to get your elephant.
I mean, this is the best take. In Pensacola, Navarre, but anyway,
I love Pensacola.
So that's where I wanted to go with you, because you had talked about Frt Pickens a little bit.
So Geronimo
Yes,
was detained
Geronimo.
in Frt Pickens. And in the Apache, I went to Mescalero, New Mexico. My dad brought us out there, and we met Geronimo's family. His grandson was running the tribe at the time in the 70s. And what I learned is that in the European culture, fire would burn down a house and kill people, and the devil was associated with fire. Well, the devil is associated with water in the desert cultures, because that's when children die when a thunderstorm comes up in a flood. So, and fire's not an enemy in the desert. You need it every night. And it doesn't run all across the place because there's room between the houses. So Geronimo was, for those reasons, and all Apaches were, terrified of water. Didn't know how to swim. Associated it archetypally with fear. And fear, incidentally, is the emotion when the water or when the bladder meridian in acupuncture is excessive. So there's something to that in an Asian-esque mindset. Geronimo was sent to Frt Pickens because it's an island and he was scared to swim away. And so after all this Mardi Gras Indian discussion, the Creole community was way into Indians. And they're heroic people that dared to shoot back at oppressive white people. And the Creole community took the train, it's rebuilt now all the way to Mobile. Maybe it'll get to Pensacola soon.
We hope.
People used to ride the train to visit Geronimo in Frt Pickens. And he had a routine of telling a story, getting all ticked off and emotional, ripping his clothes. The button would fall off, and you are so special you can keep that button. Thanks for the tons of money. And it turns out there's hundreds of people that have a button, and that his wife was sewing them on very gently where they would fall
Come
off
off.
easily. He wore a U.S. Cavalry blue jacket that from somebody that he said he'd killed. He probably bought it off of one of the guys in the jail.
Yeah.
But Geronimo was a folk healer in the Creole community.
He lived here? Where was
He lived in Frt Pickens.
Frt Pickens. But before that, where was he? Before they sent him
They
there?
had him in Oklahoma at a
Oh,
certain
okay.
point.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Oklahoma had a big fortress to guard the Indians called Fort Smith.
Mm-hmm.
The town of Fort Smith is
Yeah.
that fortress. The U.S. government has, everywhere we've ever had a war and set up a camp, we've kept that spot. The federal courthouse down the street where my wife works is at Poydras and Camp and Magazine, where the Union Army set up their camp and kept their magazine of all their munitions. And the Civil War's been over a long time, but that's still federal property. All across America and the world. Guantanamo Bay, the base in Germany that we fly out of all the time, we keep those spots. I think Bagram in Afghanistan is the first one we've surrendered.
Because we had to? I just didn't
It
want to.
gets pretty political, but no,
Yeah.
we didn't have to.
Yeah.
We decided to because we really didn't want China to bring out some blackmail about the president at that time being involved with some small Chinese girl, right? So do whatever China says. I think that's how that went. I'm not sure. I don't know.
Yeah.
It looks like that's what happened. You know, if there was a parade coming by here and you had this beautiful spot, would you voluntarily surrender it right before the parade? Doesn't make a lot of sense. I
Right.
don't know.
Yeah. Right.
I'm not here to talk politics.
Right. No. Yeah.
But
yeah.
We always have kept every spot, including Fort Smith.
So why didn't we keep that?
Almost every state has some spot, particularly out west,
Yeah.
that we've had forever since a war of some sort. You got to remember, we had Indian wars. We had the wars with Mexico. We really had like some kind of military campaign on this continent up until 1900.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, cool. Thank you
Great
so
stuff.
much. Yeah. Anything else about your music? What's your favorite part of your life?
My favorite part of my life
Yeah.
is God.
Yeah.
And the idea that, the amazing concept that like a boy that's a shepherd wrote poems and beautiful songs, and he'd pass time out there singing, you know, the Lord is my shepherd. I'm not going to want for anything. And it's really a shame that all the sheet music to that got burned down in the Library of Alexandria, Egypt fire. But those psalms, there's 150 songs that are highly inspirational. You know, the great thing about God being your favorite thing is that that's going to help you out later when you're really old.
Yeah. Were you raised Catholic?
No.
Here? No, I
I
just
went to Catholic high school because I was scared of getting beat up in the bathroom at West Jeff. I was raised in a mediocre, lukewarm Methodist church, which is a Baptist church where people don't yell. And with scared, trauma-surviving grandparents who had lost children and been through hardships and believed but had really not much to teach or say. But I was able to deduce back on Facebook from my aunt's family what our family scriptures were way back then. And I've been able to find the faith that wasn't taught to me by looking on the other side of the family. And there's just so much to learn.
Yeah.
I think God's teaching everybody, you know.
So do you worship anywhere? Like, do you, or just live in your life? Yeah.
Everywhere. I go to a Methodist church. I married a Catholic girl and agreed to have, if we can keep the kids vegetarian at Whole Food, we'll make them Catholic. And I kept my side of that. And I took them to the Catholic church, and I accepted the faith of Catholicism in high school, but it wasn't. It didn't go to the right recording process. So I thought it was also Catholic. I went to the Church of Christ in Nashville area where my mom lived. And my favorite church moment was at Temple Sinai. After the Hurricane Katrina, they'd lost their building. Their building was closed. And their building was open, and Temple Sinai offered their theater, their sanctuary to Greater St. Stephen Full Gospel Church. My friend DeVell Crawford was musical director there when he was a child. So when I like black church, because if there's something important, you say it loud, right? And so Greater St. Stephen's in exile at Temple Sinai with all of the mosaic stuff on the wall, with Reverend Morton preaching, with PJ Morton up there playing the piano. That was my favorite moment. But you gotta love St. Louis Cathedral, right?
My mom went to St. Stephen's.
Yeah.
On Napoleon. That's St. Stephen's, yeah. But yeah, of course,
It's all good.
I love St. Louis.
It's all good. I like the Eightfold Noble Path of Buddhism. I've studied international religions. None of those guys ever said they were God. None of them were ever accused of being raised from the dead, or raising other people from the dead. And 50% of Jerusalem converted instantly on Resurrection Sunday. And I've never seen a product on TV by Ron Coe or anyone else that 50% of the world bought immediately. 50% of the world didn't buy an iPhone immediately, or a car. So how do you reconcile it as a student of history that it would be a farce? And then what's up with all these people that talk about all the miracles that happened to them? It seems statistically, as a gambler, that it's less likely that it's a lie. It seems like it's working. As long as people are glad to be alive instead of sad about it, and they're giving each other parking spots and beads instead of fighting over them.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of that here this weekend too. It's been nice.
Namaste.
Namaste, that's right, yes. Yeah, well, thank you. This is great. 32 minutes of Norm. What was your last name?
Nail.
Like
a hammer.
N-A-I-L.
Which is a letter N-A-I-L. It's a letter in the Hebrew alphabet, which means holds it together.
Well, you're holding it together. Yeah, and thank you so much for meeting me. I wasn't sure, and then I ran a little late and I wasn't sure, but here you are. So lots to share.
We got the same dog.
We do.
We've got black and white
Shih Tzus. Yeah.
The T is silent.
Shih Tzu.
And it's also Schwarzenegger. People say what and it's not espresso. There's no X in it. It's Nager,
what about
espresso, and Shih Tzu.
And what about when your hip hurts? What nerve is that? It's my sciatica.
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 Sciatica's killing me, darling.
Yeah. So where can we find you around town playing anytime soon, or any?
I play in the Quarter in the mornings. And I play on Bourbon Street some, and I play on Frenchman Street some. I think the next show that I know for sure at a club is March 14th at Cafe New Grill.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. I have a lot of great musician friends in Pensacola. The community garden doubles up as a venue. And so like I was telling you, Grace and Caps and Sarah Lee Guthrie are coming, but we have some amazing girl. We have two We have a lot of amazing musicians. I got to watch my tongue on that one. But this one little girl, I call her little, she's 25, but she has like, for the past 3 or 4 years, hosting every open mic night, every talent show, every whatever, and then now is committed to once a Sunday and brings all these musicians together.
Wow.
And she's pretty epic. We have another girl.
What's her name?
Her name is Katie Deneen.
Katie Deneen.
Yeah, she's got that folky kind of.
A 25-year-old natural.
Yes, but also just bringing the music. You know, a lot of musicians do their thing, but this girl is bringing musicians together and getting musicians known, which
In
is
Pensacola, at the Garden.
She plays at the Handlebar I think whichever Sunday was this past, so the last Sunday of the month. She has singers and songwriters, local, you know, well, they come from all over, but mostly a lot of locals, Gulf Coast area. But
Pensacola is the New Orleans beach.
well, it is.
We go there.
It is. And so she's the last Sunday, Katie Deneen's her name. Love Breniver just got to open, got to play with a mixed hodgepodge. So Crispy's and on the keys, who plays for Honey Island, and his son, who plays for Marcus King on the sax, Lil Chris. She played at Mom's, which was a really big deal for her and for us, like, to see her. I did not go. She played at 2:00 in the morning, but love Breniver. She's a looper and has the energy of, I think, the whole universe coming out of her.
There's so much good energy in Pensacola.
Yeah.
I remember in the 90s, Rock for the Rainforest came out of Pensacola. And I met some wonderful people through that.
Yeah.
And on the way to Pensacola is Morgan Freeman's club
Where?
in Gulfport.
Huh. What's the name of his club? I'll look it up. Yeah, cool. I like to stop on the way back sometimes. Yeah. But anyway, thank you so much.
Pleasure to know
I'll
you.
get a little thing with you. I don't even know if I'm in here.
All right.
But thanks so much. Yeah.
Great knowing you.
And I'll just pop this on YouTube if you don't
All
care.
right.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Doubt the doubt.
When in doubt,
When in doubt, take your faculty of being able to doubt and doubt that force of doubt itself.
It's beautiful.